The gorilla, an inhabitant of Africa, is the largest living primate species on Earth. There are 3 subspecies of gorilla living in the tropical rainforest. The western lowland gorilla is found in Gabon, Cameroon, and Congo, Brazzaville. The eastern lowland gorilla lives roughly 1,000 kilometers away in eastern Congo, Kinshasa. The mountain gorilla is found high up in the Virunga volcanic chain, spanning the borders of Rwanda, Uganda, and Congo, Kinshasa. The mountain gorilla and some eastern lowland gorillas live high up in the mountain rainforest.
The first gorilla I met in Kahuzi was an enormous male named Mushamuka. My first impression was that if I showed any kind of fear, it would be the end of me. At the time, what made a strong impression on me was the way we both stood there, face to face, just looking at each other for a long time. Gorillas are extremely direct in their approach. When they hold their ground and face you off, it seems as if they do so not as if you were human, but simply as an individual. They do not direct their attention towards something else. They just face you securely, steady as a rock. But it's quite different from a confrontation between humans. He's a gorilla. I'm a human. I exhibit all my humanness and he all of his gorillaness. You just get the strong feeling that that's just the way it has to be. That first encounter was an incredible experience for me.
Juichi Yamagiwa was a graduate student in 1978 when he first started his study of gorillas in the Kahuzi National Park in the Congo. In order to begin research on gorillas in the wild, one must first start by making frequent contact with the group, getting close enough for them to become used to your presence and for them to realize that you are not a threat. This habituation process is the best way to begin any study of primates in the wild. Mountain gorillas are found in the 4,000-meter high class of mountains in the Virunga volcanic chain. The habitat of the mountain gorilla ranges from an altitude of 2,500 meters to the upper limits of the mountain rainforest, around 4,000 meters above sea level. Gorillas have the largest bodies of any living primate species. They are found only in a few remaining areas of the African rainforest. They are found in the richly diverse habitats of the African equatorial rainforest. In spite of their large body size, they are able to move freely around in the trees and on the ground. At around the age of 13, the hair on the back of males starts to turn silver. A male like this is called a silverback. An adult male can weigh over 200 kilograms, sometimes even as much as 300. Females, in contrast, weigh only about half as much. Sexual dimorphism is clearly expressed.
Gorillas are the heaviest of all the living primates. I wonder why they have come to be such large animals. All of the great apes, including orangutans, chimpanzees, and gorillas, are larger than any of the other primates. Their body size is considered to be an adaptation against predators. Primates all evolved from small insectivorous creatures related to rodents. At that time, the main predators were in the air, the hawks, eagles, and other raptors. In order to escape predation, while remaining in the trees, their body size got bigger. An animal the size of a gorilla has little to fear, even from terrestrial predators. In this way, even for originally arboreal primates, it became possible to move on to the ground without fear of predators. This is in fact thought to be the basis for why our early human-like ancestors were able to leave the forest and begin to live on the ground. That is to say, this was the period when it became possible for the ancestors of modern-day great apes to occasionally move down from the trees and venture on the ground. This is also when our earliest human ancestors first appeared. It was at this decisive time that we left the bountiful forest and expanded out into the treeless savanna. It is roughly at this time, too, that the ancestors of the gorilla were present.
Typically, gorillas live in groups of a few females and their offspring, centered around one silverback male. Let us take a look inside the rainforest and see what kind of an environment the gorilla lives in. A tropical rainforest is defined as a forest which receives at least 2,000 millimeters of rain per year. The temperature varies little from month to month. In the tropical rainforest, the number of species and the amount of fruit they produce is great. In the mountain forests of Kahuzi, during the 3-month period when rainfall is low, the amount of available fruit is large. At this time, you can see gorillas climbing up into the trees to feed. But still, a hulking 250 kilograms is a lot of weight for a tree to support. While, unlike other primates, they are not able to move from one tree to another, they are still nonetheless quite agile. With the exception of a few males that travel completely alone, most gorillas live in groups. Each group, centered around a silverback male, moves about within a loosely defined home range, always traveling on the ground. The gorillas have a large and particularly long gut. Bacteria living inside helps them to digest a cellulose-rich diet high in fibrous plant material. Thus, even in areas where food is not abundant, they are able to obtain the necessary nutrients by eating large amounts of leaves and bark. In order to properly digest all of the foods eaten in the morning, they must take long rests in the afternoon. Because of this very specialized digestive ability, the gorilla does not need to spend an exceptionally great amount of time searching for his food. Gorillas living at high altitudes are said to travel an average only about 500 to 1,000 meters a day. Many primate species inhabit the tropical rainforest, but only the gorilla can be found up above 3,000 meters, where fruits are quite scarce.
A few million years ago, in the late Miocene, the Earth began to cool. During the coolest and driest time, it is said that only a small portion of the African tropical rainforest remained. At this time, the African great apes could not have remained entirely in the trees. They would have had to move down and travel between these scattered patches of forest to survive. Thus, now not only gorillas but chimpanzees and bonobos also walk on the ground when traveling. Of course, the agile chimpanzee or bonobo are able to move about in the canopy from tree to tree with little problem. However, when traveling long distances, chimpanzees and bonobos too move best on the ground. It can be said that among these apes, gorillas are the most adapted to terrestrial life. Chimpanzees and bonobos move into the trees to feed. When they sleep at night, they also make beds up in the trees, a trait peculiar to all the great apes. Gorillas, on the other hand, feed on fruits and vines in trees, but also obtain much of their food from ground sources. When they sleep, they make beds on the ground. This point differs from bonobos and chimpanzees.
When the sun begins to set, after a full day of moving and feeding, all at once everybody makes their bed for the night and lays down. Gorillas are the only great apes that consistently make their beds on the ground at night to sleep. Let us now briefly review the history of gorilla research. Japanese primatologists were among the first to begin research on gorillas in the wild. In 1958, Kinji Imanishi and his student Junichiro Itani conducted an extensive regional survey of gorilla populations. The following year, Masao Kawai and Hiroyuki Mizuhara went to the Virungas. In 1960, Itani conducted a second survey in the Kayonza forest. In the same year, the American zoologist George Schaller succeeded in elucidating the general picture of gorilla socio-ecology. However, due to civil war in the Congo, all research was stopped. Research was not resumed again until 1967, when Diane Fossey started research in the Virungas. She employed the same habituation techniques as Schaller did and became quite familiar with the gorillas.
Diane Fossey was able to win their complete trust and enter into their lives, observing their behavior at extremely close distances. It was at this point that research on gorilla behavior and their society really began.
Let us now take a look at the kinds of foods gorillas eat.
In the local dialect, this plant is called mushe. Its Latin name is Urella hippocerondendron, and it's a favorite food of gorillas. Gorillas take a branch and remove the bark like this. Using their teeth, they carefully remove the bark with their teeth and eat it. This is a very important food for them and is eaten every day. How does such an animal maintain its large body mass? In the beginning, primates subsisted basically on insects, but later evolved to prefer a largely fruits diet. However, one cannot maintain such a large body mass feeding on insects and fruits alone. Gorillas have evolved to eat more than just fruits, and that is why they are now as large as they are today.
果実以外のものを食べることを進化の中で獲得して、でそのために非常に大きな体を維持できるようになったわけですね。
The tropical rainforest provides many kinds of food for the gorilla. Let's take a look at what kinds of foods gorillas eat and just how they eat them. This gorilla is eating the vine, locally called musha. It grows almost year-round, and gorillas eat it every day. They mainly eat the bark. This plant easily sticks to the fur. Gorillas put the entire plant into their mouth and eat it all at once. Only the leaves of this plant are eaten. This is wild celery. It is not very stringent, so they eat the entire plant. The leaves contain tannins and lignans, compounds that inhibit digestion. By eating small amounts of a lot of different things, they are able to prevent the harmful accumulation of these compounds in the body. This is thistle. Compared to the species in Japan, the leaves are stiffer. The thorns, too, are bigger and also stiff. The silverback folds the leaves so that the thistles do not prick him when he eats it. Females, on the other hand, prefer softer leaves or just pluck off the tender tips, or just eat only the flowers. There is great skill involved in eating. For some species, only the flowers are eaten. For thick vines, the stem is pulled down and broken off, removing the bark and eating only the inside. This gorilla seems a little annoyed. The youngster is skillfully eating an epiphyte while moving alone in the trees. If you look closely enough, you'll see that the secret is in his feet. What would be the arch in a human foot is long and curved. It is especially shaped to easily grasp onto branches. This infant is drinking its mother's milk. Even when an infant is able to look for and eat on its own, it continues to nurse until around the age of 3 or 4. At birth, it will weigh only about 2 kilograms, but by the age of 5, it can easily weigh more than 50. This is a classic example of giving birth to small infants and raising them up big. Gorillas occasionally eat insects and other things as well. This is the army ant. It has powerful jaws. There is no need to fear going hungry. Gorillas can spend the entire day moving around in the supermarket-style environment. Whether traveling, feeding, or resting, a silverback male can always be found at the center of the group. In this way, the unique feeding habits and abundance of food available to the gorilla is responsible for the compactness of their group.
The evolution of the unique social structure of gorillas was brought about by the acquired capacity to survive off the abundantly growing vegetation found on the forest floor. Fruits are not available at the same site year-round. Furthermore, not all the species of fruits come into maturity at the same time. Because fruits ripen a little bit at a time, only a small amount can be obtained at a time. In order to obtain an ample amount to satisfy such a large animal each day, it would have to travel far and wide to find enough scattered sources of fruits to survive. As you can see, however, these herbaceous plants fed upon by gorillas occur at a high density all year round. Great apes like the gorilla, which feed largely on the abundant terrestrial herbaceous vegetation, need only to travel a short distance in a day to find them. Such apes rarely fight amongst themselves. They are able to eat peacefully side by side. Compared to the largely fruit-eating chimpanzee or bonobo, they form very compact, cohesive social groups. Furthermore, when neighboring groups approach, there is rarely, if ever, any conflict over access to food. Because of these conditions, compared to the fruit-eating apes, neighboring groups do not partition the environment into territories. Their home ranges overlap, and there is a social system in which feeding competition is extremely rare. This is a very important socio-ecological characteristic of gorillas.
In the tropical rainforest, annual rainfall exceeds 2,000 millimeters. In an average year, there are 3 months in which less than 50 millimeters of rain fall. This period is called the dry season. This does not mean that there is absolutely no rainfall, however, only that it rains less. Rain supports the forest and its inhabitants. The dry and rainy seasons are responsible for the great variation in fruit availability. Gorillas are sensitive to these changes and respond accordingly. When fruit is abundant, they may travel longer distances together in search of them. But when fruits are scarce, they shorten their travel distance and focus on eating leaves and other herbaceous vegetation. In effect, they change their strategy from being energy consumers to energy savers in accordance with food availability. Someone has approached the group. Suddenly, the silver male beats his chest, producing a drumming sound in the direction of the intruder. This alerts the other group members.
While I believe that there is very little conflict among gorilla groups over access to food, this does not mean that they do not fight among each other. In particular, serious conflicts arise among males over access to female mating partners. Male-male mating competition can be extremely severe. The typical composition of a gorilla group consists of one male and 3 to sometimes more than 10 females and their young offspring. Females and their young clump together. This is known as a single male multi-female group. Because gorillas do not maintain territories and their home ranges greatly overlap, groups can frequently come into contact with each other. When groups do encounter, the rival males often confront each other in dramatic display. At such times, males frequently perform the characteristic chest-beating display. The capacity to perform this behavior is a morphological trait characteristic only to males. In adult males, an air sac develops in the area between the throat and pectoral region of the chest. When filled tight with air and then beaten, this sac functions like a drum. The behavior, in fact, is called drumming. Using the open palms of both hands, the chest is beaten. The resulting sound can normally be heard within a 2 square kilometer radius. This is said to aid a male in his advertisement displays. This allows males to inform all neighboring males of other groups of their presence. This information helps groups to avoid each other when necessary. On the other hand, it can also be used by males looking for mates to boldly confront other groups and lure females away. It can be said that for males in gorilla society, competition is particularly strong for access to mates, but not for food resources.
In between feeding and resting time, gorillas engage in grooming. Besides removing ectoparasites, grooming plays an important role in strengthening close bonds between individuals and in maintaining group cohesiveness. Compared to chimpanzees or bonobos, however, the frequency of grooming is low. This may be due to the fact that because gorillas maintain such cohesive groups to begin with, the necessity for more frequent grooming is small. Let us look at how gorilla groups are actually formed.
Male gorillas leave their natal group around the age of 11 or 12 when they begin to sexually mature. They reach adulthood at around the age of 13. They may spend the next 2 to 5 years moving around alone or in male groups in the forest. During this period, males approach other groups, display an attempt to attract females to join them. They are unable to forcefully take females away with them, but if attracted to a male, she will voluntarily leave her group to follow him. Females mature at around 10, and from around this age, they will transfer directly into neighboring group or leave with a solitary male. When the females settle down with the male and begins to raise offspring, more females will also join the group. In this way, the one male, multiple female group structure begins to consolidate. At the point when the silverback begins to age and his reproductive activity slows down, any adolescent sons remaining in the group at the time are likely and assist the aging father in the protection of the group. Eventually, after his death, one or more of the sons will take over the group. We are thus able to outline the life history aging cycle of gorilla group structure. The group is not simply a single male, multi-female group. According to varying circumstances, there may be only one adult male, a father and his adult son, or even 2 adult sons responsible for the group. There may be many females or only a few females. In the extreme case, a group may temporarily consist only of an adult male-female pair. These different compositions reflect the age or developmental stage of the group. New and old groups coexist within the same local regions and interact with each other to form a large gorilla community.
Once a male has formed his own group, chances are he will remain there for life. This is a very important characteristic to keep in mind. When the young are weaned, they develop a special relationship with the silverback male. Much of the job of parenting and protection is thus handed over to the father.
Earlier, I described the important ecological characteristics and the role they play in gorilla society. The most important of these to bear in mind is the great compactness of the group. This characteristic exerts a subtle but important role on reproduction and breeding. Firstly, a female is always with the same male. Therefore, if the female is in estrus, she has not reason to advertise her reproductive state to any other male. He can evaluate her condition just by the way she behaves. Female gorillas have an efficient estrus cycle. They are only in estrus 2 to 3 days around the time of ovulation. It is impossible, however, to detect this state from external features. Given the limited time period, they are thus able to very effectively come into estrus, mate, and then conceive. Another important element of this efficient reproductive activity is that during the period mothers are nursing, they do not come into estrus. During the lactation period, the mother produces a hormone known as prolactin, which inhibits the secretion of estrogen and progesterone, the sex hormones important for maintaining the female reproductive cycle. Thus, as long as the female is lactating, she will not come into estrus. A female is able to maintain a close bond with her infant and raise it without coming into estrus too soon. Once the infant has been weaned, however, the mother no longer pays excessive attention to it. Instead, at the appropriate time, the mother encourages it to stop nursing and tries to get it to spend more time with other members of the group. One of the first opportunities for this shift in attention is the adult male.
A gorilla infant is always by its mother's side. The mother is always attentive. The father does not completely ignore it either. When the young reach about 3 years of age, the mother begins to take it near the silverback. Beyond this age, it is not at all unusual for the silverback to be looking closely after a youngster. They often will play with them and will not get too upset if they are pounced on, have their hair pulled, or are playfully hit. Sometimes, however, if things get out of hand, when playing with the very young, the male will accommodate his little partner by laying on his back or by sitting down so as to regulate his own strength. This is called self-handicapping. Because of this skill, individuals of different ages are able to play with each other for long periods of time. The extraordinary capacity for play in humans, too, no doubt is based on this very important skill.
Until puberty, a young gorilla's guardian is not its mother, but in fact a specific male, its father. The presence of the father is a very important and unique aspect of gorilla society. While the infant is still nursing, the adult male pays little attention to it, but from the period after weaning up puberty, the father maintains a very special relationship with his offspring. The adult male's role is more like that of a protector or guardian figure, watching over them often from a distance. That is to say, the father exerts a strong influence on the young until they mature. This important trait probably has its beginnings in gorilla society. The reason I brought this point up is that when comparing humans with other non-human primate species, one of the biggest differences found is the absence of the family as a social unit. This was the very first objective for investigation of primate proposed by Kinji Imanishi, the founder of primatology in Japan. Imanishi proposed 4 criteria for forming the foundation of the human family. They are exogamy, an incest taboo, sexual division of labor, and the presence of community. The last criteria is probably the most important. He exerted that the family cannot exist in isolation, but must interact with other family units, whereby forming a higher level of social organization that allows for the transfer of individuals between groups and the cooperation of many groups as a whole. This higher level of society is called a community, and only after its emergence was the family as a social unit able to exist and continue. This is the image Imanishi was proposing. Shortly thereafter, his students and others began their studies of a number of different primate species. When their social organizations were revealed, neither the gorilla nor any other species investigated was found to have such a community structure. Agonistic intergroup relations are the norm among non-human primate species. Therefore, members of different groups do not, as a rule, freely mix with each other. That is, a larger group cannot be broken up into smaller, equally stable groups. Imanishi's concept of the family and community could not be found in non-human primates. That is, unlike among human families, primate groups were not found to have a mutual bond in which a spirit of cooperation on the community level was recognized. However, I wanted to take a second look at gorilla society from the perspective of the origins of the human family. In the human family, a sociological father always exists. The rudimentary existence of this can be found in some non-human primates. The father, unlike the mother, who suffered through labor to give birth to its child, does not physically know who his child is. He does not come to realize this relationship through his own experience at the birth of the child. A male does not become a father until his mate entrusts the child's care to him, and the child itself recognizes him as his guardian and parent. I think it is quite possible that the concept of the father and its emergence in our species first came about by a process similar to what we see now in gorillas. After the emergence of the existence of the father in human society, it is likely that relationships between groups, which were once antagonistic, became less so, and this led to the formation of a larger social level of organization, the community. This process appears to have happened only in humans.
When the gorilla was first introduced to the Western world some 150 years ago, it was portrayed as a devilish creature. But in actuality, the gorilla lives a life very similar to that of the prototype of the human family. Clues to the evolution of the human father lie within the existence of silverback male gorillas.
父親というものがさっきも言ったように
As I mentioned before, the concept of father is not based on biology alone. This is an incredibly strong social influence as well. An individual must be recognized as a guardian of a child by all members of the group of both sexes from the same and different age groups. The father is a cultural concept, not a biological one. It has been removed from nature and embedded into society. I believe that early humans took something that was strongly attached to nature and made it more complex and integrated it into a social context for use as an important tool. If this is the case, not based on biology, but rather culture, fatherhood is a very early form of human culture. This was likely the product of early humankind's unique sociality, something that could not have sprung forth from gorillas. What the gorilla was incapable of forming was a well-integrated community based on the co-reliance and cooperation of smaller group units or families. Gorillas maintain peaceful relationships with neighboring groups, but they were unable to form the kind of community that involves the ability to use cooperative ties and inter-family relationships to work together as a united society. Our early human ancestors most likely accomplished this, and that was what enabled them to leave the forest, unlike gorillas, and move into new regions and environments. Because humans have the strength inherent in family organization, I believe that humans were able to survive as humans.
Gorillas are like a mirror, an important reflection of our past. With each passing year, however, the forests in which they live are decreasing in size. Political and economical instability is one of the causes of this problem. There are now only about 600 mountain gorillas left in the wild. The total lowland gorilla population was previously estimated to be around 15,000, but due to the Civil War in 1999, these numbers are feared to have plummeted to below 3,000. In the Kahuzi forest, their numbers are thought to have fallen to 250 or 100. We must extend our hands to help. If not soon, these creatures may disappear from the face of the earth.